Hello there everyone on the internet, or at least the people watching this show. It's the third episode of Bits and Pieces. That's right, our third episode. I was not expecting to do more than one of these, and yet somehow I've wound up doing a third episode. And what am I doing this third episode on? Well, a little bit of a piece of technology. Things that go into other things. That's not really supposed to stand up, so that's alright, but if we do that, it still doesn't do anything. This is a mobile phone cradle, or a cell phone cradle I suppose, if you're American, or if you use the term cell phone. It's one of these things that seems to be coming up more and more often because more and more people are realising that they can use their phone rather than a TomTom or other sat-nav device, because there's usually a GPS built into the phones now. Of course, in some cases you have to have the internet turned on as well, which kind of makes you wonder why they need a GPS. Can't they just have one or the other? But no, in some cases you have to have both. Well, this little cradle thing doesn't work that well in all cases, and that's probably because of the inherent cheapness of the design and the materials. Got a little button here to press to allow this to expand and contract and so on. Doesn't do that good a job. This bit hooks onto the windscreen. This bit here holds it in place. These bits here allow everything to be moved and positioned as you want it, and so on. Da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da-da. Feel like I'm doing a toy review like you would have in so many other channels. Full 360-degree rotation. This bit pops off like that. And that's one of the flaws of this thing. It does tend to come off quite easily. I found that when I've taken it off the windscreen, I've used this a few times myself now. When I try taking it off, it's best to take this bit off first, because otherwise, if you try to take the whole thing down together at the same time, it tends to fall off. And of course that could lead to problems of a different sort. Got a little lock here that doesn't always work in all cases, but never mind. Here's my phone. I still haven't perfected the art of getting this thing to hold it in place, but it does a decent enough job. You'll notice that there's foam to protect the phone's edges, but you may also notice, if I can get this in shot properly, yes, how amateur is this production, that it doesn't really connect properly. It doesn't really cover those areas. It's literally just touching. But for the most part, you can obviously have your phone bit come on. That's the on-off button there. That's the volume over here, power and so on. It works. It's cheap plastic, but it otherwise works quite well. On an entirely different note, we have the 11th Doctor sonic screwdriver. All two sound effects. And of course it extends, because the Doctor has absolutely nothing to compensate for. But unfortunately, the way they've designed this, the button then stops working. Thankfully, you've got this bit here. That does still work, although if you want to do it one-handed, you have to sort of go like this, which I can't recall seeing Matt Smith do. Also this bit, because it's all plastic, quite a solid plastic overall, these bits are a bit more vulnerable. This bit does tend to come off quite easily. You might prefer it that way, or you might not. These plastic bits here, not as solid and rigid as the rest, but they're not going to break easily. Not unless you really decide to hammer it home and use it as if there was a sonic hammer or a lightsaber, which I dare say some people probably have. Also, this little bit here, this telescopic bit, does sometimes shoot off when you do the extending trick. Comes off easily enough, comes back on quite easily as well. So long as you don't lose it, that's absolutely fine. But whoever designed this toy, there are little flaws like this little bit here, the button not working when it's extended, that flying off, that flying off. You could do better, boys. Please, next time, if Capaldi's got a different sonic screwdriver, try to do it better next time. Back on a more serious note, for those of you who have an iPod, or any kind of device that would be iPod-like, or iPad-like rather, there's me mixing my terms up. Well, it is past my bedtime, and I haven't had anything to eat or drink, and so on. But there's this thing, it's a stand apparently allows you to watch, view and type in a position comfortable to you. Holds iPad both landscape and portrait. It's easy to adjust. Strong, sturdy and lightweight. And it was also very cheap. Easy and adjusts and so on, and shows you exactly what it's supposed to do. I was going to ask if I should open it, but I've already done that, so I don't need to. As you can see, it's supposed to stand in place. You tighten these bits here, I assume, and that should hold it in place, but it doesn't seem to want to tighten up properly here. This one's tightened up perfectly. This one still feels like it has. There we go. So it's adjustable, but you really need to have an iPad. I don't have an iPad, but I do have something else, and that fits in quite nicely. And its cover as well. Now this is a Nexus 10. I'll just show you in its own little cover what it can do. It can cast reflections. I really should have closed the curtains on the other side of the house, I suppose, but there you go. And there's the camera. And there's me dodging out of view. Oh dear. But you can do stuff like this. Watch it fall. You can see the fans in my so on and so forth. It does the trick alright, I suppose. The little stylus pen, it really is a pen. See, it works. But it's seen some bumps and bruises over the year. You know, I've only had this since Christmas. It's August as I record this, but as you can see, that really is a cheap material that they made the pen out of. It really did put some corners there. It actually stays in place with Velcro. I haven't had this out in ages. And there you go. Actually using it by hand like this can be a bit unwieldy. It's also just turned itself off. It's reset itself as I as I do this. I'm just surprised at just how dusty it was. I'm literally doing this on the fly, so I had no intention of actually showing off how dirty it was, but there you go, Samsung Nexus. Decent enough. I might review it separately in some of the time and place, but let's just put it in here. As you can see, it actually does the trick quite nicely, although it does seem to fit quite nicely in it. It seems to sit quite low. So that's portrait, and of course it's not set up quite correctly in that regard, but at least you're getting some idea of what the time was when this was recorded. Not that was my intention, but there you go, and you can even see what manner I have of security devices. I may need to re-edit this at some point, so let's just do a little bit of a jump cut. So I've done a bit of a jump cut, and we're now looking at the stand set up as it's supposed to, but with a Nexus 10 rather than an iPad. Of course, it's a generic little piece of equipment, so although they're probably trying to appeal to people in iPads, people who buy Apple products probably don't go to places like Poundland or Pound World, which is where I picked it up. It seems to do the trick quite nicely, although it doesn't seem to really have much in the way of security. These have been tightened as much as they can be, but it still just doesn't want to know. So basically, if you can see something like this and you think it's going to do the trick for you, you might want to pick it up. I wouldn't really recommend it because it's basically a cheap, nasty piece of rubbish. Anyhow, you get what you pay for, definitely there. That was only £1. And it doesn't really feel very secure. I'll probably keep it. I'll probably find some use for it in some regard, but probably not what it was meant for. Well, that's it for today. Tatty bye.